Welcome. This is our 8th virtual meeting. We met before COVID. We met twice a month, once in Valley Stream and once in at a house that I was doing. And we have been virtual since COVID. It's our 8th meeting, and we're doing them twice a month now. So the next one will be in 2 weeks on Thursday also. Okay, so first the agenda for today. First 5 minutes is just a quick introduction of who I am. Next 5 minutes is really the state of the current New York real estate market and my business. The next 15 minutes are going to be, we're going to deal with buying and dealing with occupied properties in New York now and after COVID, which really is like before COVID, but things are very different now. But I'm going to talk about buying occupied properties and what you do if you do buy an occupied property and why it's relevant today. And the last 5 minutes are going to be how I can help you. Then we're going to have questions and answers and feedback until around 5 in the past, but I'll go till 5:30 as long as anybody's got questions. You can ask questions about anything. Doesn't necessarily need to be about what we're going to discuss today. It can be about any topic that, any real estate related topic. So first, who am I? So my name is Michael Pinter. I bought my first house on Long Island in 1996. I've been full-time as a real estate investor since 2013. So I was part-time doing it before that. I had 17 years in the real estate finance industry, which is really the mortgage industry. I worked for the same company for 17 years, and I was investing part-time during that time. The first 4 years in the business, I was buying at live auctions, online auctions, and gut rehabbing every single property. I wanted to be Tarek El Moussa from Flip or Flop and have open concept houses and the best houses. And after about 4 years of doing that, I realized it was hard for me to buy at auctions, as you can't really control whether you buy the property or not. And for the last almost 5 years, I've been marketing direct to sellers and either rehabbing, wholesaling the properties, or wholetailing, which we'll talk about what that means in a minute. My office is in Hewlett. Anybody can come by and see it. You can come by and take a look. I operate mostly in Nassau and a little bit of Suffolk. I'm trying to get trying to narrow down my geography so I don't spend so much time driving, because I know traffic's going to come back at some point. I did over 45 deals last year, with about half being wholesale. So being wholesale deals where I go to contract, I then assign that contract to usually another investor who's going to do the rehab. And the other half I closed on and either rehabbed, which means do major renovation to and then sell, or wholesale, which means I buy it, I do very, very little to it, sometimes nothing, and then sell it retail. Okay, so the Nassau County REIA has been around 15 months. We started, I think, May or June of last year. And what's happened since we started? So more than 65 members have come to the office. Everyone's invited to come by. Several REIA members have brought in deals that they didn't know if they were deals, and I co-wholesaled with them. So I put up my money, found the buyer, and we split the profits. Several members have bought wholesale deals from me and either wholesaled or rehabbed them. Several members have borrowed from me on their flips. I also lend in certain situations. Okay, so the current real estate market situation, right? So this was a bad situation in New York. A lot of people died, but it's soon going to be a tremendous opportunity for real estate investors, right? For me, I had a completely worthless March, April, and really May, but business has definitely picked up in June and July and in August. July was one of my best months ever, and it happened with minimal marketing. I really stopped marketing when COVID happened because I was getting such negative feedback from the people that I was marketing to. And I had 11 properties in contract for sale that I couldn't sell really for all of March and April. I started selling them all the way at the end of May. But July was amazing. August is looking great. I usually do 7 to 8 transactions per month. That means 4 buys and 4 sells, about that. So I buy about 4 properties a month and sell 4 properties a month. I'm counting a wholesale there as both of those sides. So I've never been as sure that something's about to happen as I am now. I don't make predictions, I don't. But the real estate market in New York and most of the country is definitely going to go down, right? I think there's going to be more money made in the real estate market over the next year or two than ever was made before. And I don't know when it's going to happen exactly. I don't know how much the market's going to go down, and I don't know how long it's going to go down for, but it's got to go down. Let me explain why I think that. The economy is really about to hit the crapper. There's hundreds of billions of dollars that are gone from the economy. I just picked a few industries. There's much more than what I picked. The hospitality industry. So if you work in a hotel, hotels are laying off 90% of their staff. you work in the Javits Center, you haven't worked since February. Any convention related job is probably not working right now. The travel industry, cruises, airlines, these are multi-billion, these are hundreds of billions of dollars. And everybody who supplies the cruise industry, everybody who supplies the airline industry, everybody who supplies hotels or supplies conventions, these businesses are down around 90%. All food service, right? Even if you're a restaurant and you're serving people outside or you're serving people takeout, you let people go. These are millions of jobs. These are gone, huge numbers of jobs that are gone, and they're not coming back for a very long time. The economy is going to be bad for a while. Many people were collecting much more in unemployment insurance over the last few months. I didn't know this, but the government was giving people $600 a week in federal benefits, and then people were still getting the state benefits. So you could have been getting $600 a week from New York State, and you're getting $600 a week from the government. You're getting $1,200 a week. Most people were not making that before. And because of the PPP, the Payment Protection Program, and the EIDL, Economic Insurance Disaster Loan, something like that, people were paying people when they really weren't doing any work. I got a PPP loan, and I paid people in March and April who weren't doing anything. And because it wasn't coming out of my pocket. I mean, they say it's a loan, but it's completely forgivable. This all ended last week. So we're about to see what's really going to happen because the government has taken trillions of dollars and propped up the economy until now. Now, so let's talk about what's going on right now. So this was an article published 2 days ago, right? Home prices see a strong June bounce, but economists warn it likely won't last. So someone showed me this next slide. So this is Showing Time. Showing Time is a national service that schedules showings of properties, right? It was a time where I did not have a dispositions manager, who I do now have, where I made all properties that I was showing, I had them scheduled through Showing Time. It's a company that works throughout the country. So I did this just for New York, but you see similar numbers in every place. This is a gauge of what's happening. So 0% in the middle is what's normal. And then it dropped to zero it dropped to nothing, down 100%. I don't think it can go lower than minus 100% in April. And now that it's come up, it's 100% higher. So there are twice as many showings going on now in June, July than there were before. So what you had people who wanted to buy houses and they couldn't go see them. Now they're buying them, and the market is incredibly hot. And it's not just hot in New York, it's hot all over the country. I'm part of a national mastermind, and we just finished a quarterly meeting. It was virtual. I mean, I didn't go, I could have flown to Dallas, but I did it virtually. And all over the country, people are saying the same things. Market is super hot. Just heard a guy in Baltimore say he put something out for $299,000. He thought that was a fair price. Just sold it for $350 in a couple of days. You got people who, somebody in Philly said the same thing. Put something out for $200 in a suburb, sold it for $260. Like, prices are crazy now. Super hot all over the country, but it's not going to last, right? Now, there are some signs of it, right? We saw this was Sunday that retail rents are plummeting across New York City. Areas that you thought, if you owned property on Fifth Avenue or Park Avenue, you thought you were set. Rents were going to go up forever. Things are going down now, and I am very happy that I don't own any retail or office space. If I did, I'd be scared in a huge way, because I think retail and office space are going to be changed for a generation. I really do believe that. I honestly believe that if you own office space now, you're in big trouble, because I know people who work for huge companies, Goldman Sachs, Deloitte, and they're being told, don't plan on coming back to the office for 2020. And we'll talk about it in 2021. And Goldman Sachs has 2 massive office towers that they own. I wouldn't be surprised if they sell one of them, because the way offices are going to work going forward, for a company that's had decent productivity during COVID, right? If they've been just as productive for the last few months, there is no reason for them to own a $1 billion office tower, or 2 of them, if they can own 12 floors, and that'll be enough. They're going to go to hoteling, which means that they're going to have flex space. And if you need an office, you can come into the office and we'll give you a desk, but you don't need to come into the office every day. People can work from home and be just as productive. Think about the rents that some of the law firms pay in Manhattan on Park Avenue. If they don't need that, if people were billing at the same hourly rate for the past few months, what the hell do they need to pay those rents for? They won't give up their office completely, but if they had 4 floors in a building, they'll take 1 floor. So I personally think that this is going to generationally change office space and retail space, because a lot of retailers are going to be out of business and not open again. But this is like just the first sign of it. This doesn't really reflect what's going on with houses. But this was also from Sunday. People feel like the housing crisis is here. Now, this is being portrayed as something where renters can't find places. The fact that there's this moratorium on evictions has a big effect on things. So people are buying houses, but landlords don't want to rent, and landlords can't get rid of tenants whose leases are over or are not paying rent. Which leads us to today's topic, right? And someone asked about this yesterday, so this is why I am going to talk about it. So I'm going to talk about occupied properties in New York. We're going to talk about why I usually do buy occupied properties. I like buying. Before this whole thing, I liked buying occupied properties, but why I'm very skeptical about buying occupied properties now because of the legislation that's going on. And how do you deal with an owner of a foreclosed property if you buy a property and the owner is in there, or if you buy a foreclosed property and the tenant's in there? Or how do you deal with a squatter? And basically how evictions work in Nassau County. I've done a lot of evictions in Nassau County. Obviously, things are different in Suffolk and very different in the 5 boroughs. So why do I usually like to buy occupied properties? I find there's much less competition. A lot of investors, even experienced investors, will not buy occupied properties. What I find is that a lot of people who buy in my area, and I really only operate on Long Island, are people who do a lot of business in the 5 boroughs. And the 5 boroughs is really a disaster, much harder to evict. So they have this thought in their head, and if a seller says to an investor that I'm not telling the tenant to leave, a lot of investors are going to walk away from that deal right away. For me, I have bought dozens of properties only because I said I'll take it with the tenant. And ironically, very often, they deliver it to me vacant. There's a whole few reasons why that happens. Sometimes they tell the tenant is selling and the tenant's scared. Sometimes their attorney sends a standard contract in that says they're going to deliver it vacant. Even when I had a conversation with the seller, it says I'll take it occupied. And the attorney calls the seller and says, hey, we're going to close in a month. You better get that tenant out. That happened twice last year where I specifically told the seller I'll take it with the tenant, and the seller delivered to me vacant. It's great. I know and understand the eviction process and costs. We'll talk more about what those are soon. So I'm very comfortable with doing evictions. I do multiple evictions every year. Although this year I did one before everything went crazy. And I have a good process for dealing with the occupants, and we'll talk about how I handle occupants later. So I usually like buying them, but the current legislation is a game changer, right? So statewide or nationwide eviction moratoriums, they scare the shit out of me because it changes the whole dynamic of the whole narrative, right? It changes the narrative. The occupants know that they cannot be evicted. Most courts in New York, as of today, I spoke to my attorney today, are not even accepting eviction filings yet. If you have somebody who stopped paying their rent in February, you can't even start the process. This is going to be a long process, all right? The president already said he wants to extend this, and Congress may pass it. He's going to get a lot of support in Congress for extending the moratorium on evictions. So it shifts the entire narrative. It allows the occupants to wait, ignore you, and even if you can get in touch with them, the power is shifted from the owner/landlord to the tenant occupant. Right? We're going to talk more about how that works later, but this general attitude is why I don't buy in New York City. I won't buy occupied in New York City for sure, because if you really know how to work the system in New York City, you could easily delay an eviction for 2 years if you are represented. In Nassau County and Suffolk, it's hard to get something longer than 6 months, and most things take 3 to 4 months in New York, in Nassau. So what do you do when you're buying? What do you do when you are buying occupied property? So what do I do? So the first thing is I try to get in touch with the occupants as soon as I'm in contract. Before I even close, I try and reach out to them. I always speak to the seller about it first, but this is when I'm in contract and I'm obligated to buy, and the seller's obligated to sell. Now, it's a challenge, right? Most occupants are not paying rent. That's usually the reason why they're selling it. If they are paying rent, it's a different story. But if they're not paying rent, certainly if it's a foreclosure, they're probably not paying rent. They don't want the status quo to end. So I'll call, I'll mail, I'll leave notes on their door, I'll leave notes on their car. I'll go every day, knock on the door every day for 2 weeks, leave my card in between the door and the door jamb. sometimes whatever it is to get in touch with them, but still half the time they won't make any contact with you. They just won't. Maybe 50% of the time they will reach out to you. And if they do reach out, I may tell them that I already bought the property, even if I'm just in contract. The reason why is because I made the mistake of telling people that I was going to buy the property. And every tenant who had some kind of conflict with his landlord, who I told I was going to buy the property, focused all their attention and time on telling me why I shouldn't buy the property after that. Oh, the place is a shithole. It's disgusting. The seller's a jerk. That's it. That's all I heard. Once I told them I bought the property, at least I was able to have a discussion with them. So I always try to find out if they're the owner or the tenant. If I buy a foreclosure at an auction, I want to know if they're the owner or the tenant. We'll talk about why that matters later. How long have they been there for? And we'll talk about why that matters later too. And how much rent they are or were paying. You want to get an idea, right? Now, sometimes you buy a property and very common that a landlord will sell a property where they're charging way below rent, way below market rent, right? I can't tell you how many landlords there are in Nassau County who are charging $1,200 for a house, $1,300 for a two-bedroom apartment. They just don't get it. And I hear the same story every time. Oh, he's a good tenant. I don't want to rock the boat. You can get $2,000 easily for a two-bedroom apartment almost anywhere in Nassau County today. And if it's a decent-sized house, you can probably get $3,000. So I see all the time people paying below market rent. And then when they tell me, oh, I'm paying $1,200 for this house, I know this is going to be more of a problem. Because as soon as they go out there looking for a new place, they're going to find out that they can't find anything for similar rent. And it's good to know that because it's going to affect how much money you offer them and really how long it's going to take for them to get out. So I always offer people cash payment to leave, always. I usually calculate my costs for 3 to 4 months. That's what an eviction usually takes. And I offer them a percentage of it depending on the situation. So you've got to understand the situation, right? There's one judge in Nassau County. So that's the entire Nassau County except for the city of Long Beach and the city of Glen Cove. It's one courthouse. And for many years, there's only one judge. His name is Scott Fairgrieve. He's a great guy. Now they sort of switch him in and out. But if a person says that they have a special needs child, he's very, very reluctant to throw that person out on the street. So you got to know the situation. How are they going to see him in court? What's going to happen? Sometimes I'll offer more if I think it's going to be a bigger problem or a longer process. So let me give you an example. If my monthly costs to hold the property are $3,000, so that's taxes, my interest costs if I have, any other costs, I may offer them $8,000 to leave in 30 days and $4,000 to leave in 60 days. And I make it very clear, there's no money after that, right? If you're not out in 60 days, I'm going to spend my money on attorneys and court fees. And I basically frame it and present it as, listen, you can leave soon with a check in your hand from me, or you can leave a little later with nothing. Despite all that, half the people still won't take it. So maybe 25% of the occupants will take a buyout. Most won't, right? They look at it as, again, it's an emotional thing. It's not a logical thing. Logically, they all should take my first offer, get the hell out of there, wherever they have to go. Even if they have to go move to a hotel. But it's an emotional thing, and they look at it as, I don't want to pack. I don't want to find another place. I don't do it. It's just the way it is. So no matter what the tenants say to you, you always begin the eviction process as soon as possible, right? Ideally, you want to start the eviction process before you even buy it. So if the seller is someone you can talk to, and I'll offer them my eviction attorneys, and they'll start the process and at least get notice sent to them. And you can take over that eviction after. But if it's a bank or something, that's never going to happen. So there are standard lies that I hear all the time from tenants and that I used to fall for before I did a few deals. The standard lie I hear a lot is, I want to buy the house. I'm in negotiation with the seller to buy the house, right? I'm getting a mortgage, right? That never, ever happens, ever. So people tell you that they're buying the house, they're never buying the house. A more common thing they'll say is, I'm looking for a new place. I just got to find the place I'll be out soon. Sometimes that's true. But whatever they say, regardless of what they say, you start the eviction process and get them served. We'll talk about what that entails later. Now, if you own a property in your personal name, I don't recommend you do, you can do the eviction without an attorney called pro se. I used to do that many years ago. I had properties in my own name, and I can probably do an eviction better than most attorneys. But if you own the property in a corporation or LLC, which is the right way to do it, you have to use an attorney. The corporation or the LLC is not allowed to represent itself. So a mistake I see made all the time is that people use attorneys that they just know. So my cousin's an attorney, my brother's an attorney. What kind of attorney? He's an immigration attorney. What kind of attorney is he? He's a litigator. Don't use an attorney that doesn't really know landlord-tenant issues. Use an attorney who does. If you need an attorney, I have a good one. 2 guys out of Hempstead. They're very, very nice to me. So what happens if you buy a property, a foreclosure, right? And one of the reasons why I bring this up is because there's a huge amount of inventory on the online auction site. So on Xome, that's Xome, auction.com, Hubzu, there's a lot of inventory there. Almost everything is occupied. And I could probably buy 10 more properties a month on these auction sites if I didn't mind the fact that they were occupied. But I do mind the fact that they're occupied because I think they're, in some of these cases, you're not going to get the people out for a year. So if you buy a property and the person in there ends up being the owner, then congratulations, you hit the jackpot. You're much better off than if they were a bona fide tenant. Now, what a bona fide tenant, the legal term means, is a real tenant. So not the owner, not the owner's cousin, somebody who's actually paying rent. If you buy a property, and I bought properties where the owners were in there, you only need to give them 15 days notice, right? You probably should give them 30 days, but then you can start the eviction process. But be very sure, and this is a mistake I screwed up on, that there are no tenants living in there. I bought a property, I thought the owner was fine, and then I found that there was a basement tenant who was technically illegal, but the problem is they weren't given proper notice, and that screwed up my whole eviction. This was many years ago. Now, if you buy a property and there's a tenant in there, so you got a long, really long haul in front of you, because to get a tenant out in a foreclosure situation, the minimum amount of time notice you have to give them is 6 months. And the law just changed this year that if they live there more than 2 years, and God knows how you're supposed to know how long they lived there for, you have to give them an extra month for every additional year. So you might have to give them 18 months notice, which is insane. That's before you can start the eviction process. That's not before they leave. That's before you can start the eviction process. So this is why I'm not buying occupied properties on Hubzu, because for all I know, there's a tenant that's been living in there for 10 years. And now I got to give him 16 months notice before I can start the eviction. That's insanity. And the guy's not going to pay you during that time. So you're not even allowed to take payments during that time. So be very sure you know how many people are in there, or approximately how many people are in there, and every possible unit in the house. I had a situation where it was a tenant, and I offered them money, and they took it, and I didn't realize that there was like 3 extra rooms being rented to 3 other people, and then I had to give them notice. It was a big pain. So when you're talking to people and they accept, when I talk to an occupant and they say they're going to accept it, I make them sign an affidavit that everybody is going to be out of that house before I pay them any money. So let's talk about squatters. So squatters are something that I deal with probably once or twice a year. I just dealt with 2 squatter situations. Most squatters are just junkies who are looking for some place to get high, right? They're easy. You go in there, you tell them to leave, they leave, and they don't come back. But some squatters are sophisticated, and they're going to write up a fake lease. So I had a situation maybe 6 months ago, a property in Elmont. I checked it. I check it every week, and I check it, and 2 days later, I see lights on at night. So I don't want to go at night, but I went the next morning, and I use the same method every time, which is I go bananas, right? I go with a baseball bat. I wake them up maybe 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, bang on the door, hit the doorbell 50 times, wake them up, and just go bonkers, right? I don't hit them in the head, but I'll bust a hole in the wall. Now, I'm a big guy. I'm 6'1", I'm 210. You may not want to do this if you're small, but I just go crazy. Now, the reason why I don't want to hurt anybody, but the problem is if you're nice and you just call the police and the guy has a lease, you got a 50-50 chance that the cop is just going to say, you know what, this is a landlord-tenant issue. I don't want to get involved. That's the worst thing that can happen to you. Now you got to actually spend money and deal with some guy who just broke into your house. So I just go bananas. What I find is even the sophisticated squatters who bring a lease, I'm cursing, I'm going crazy. Their story doesn't hold up. So in this case, the guy's like, oh, I got a lease from John. So I ask the same questions every time. I go, give me John's number. I want to call him. I want to know who's renting out my house. He never has a number for John. I don't know the number. I go, I don't understand. You don't have the electricity in your name. What happens if electricity was out? Who would you call? Like, what happens if something breaks? Who would you call? And then when you say that to them, they realize their story's not going to hold up, and they're going to get out of there, right? Because their story is always bullshit. You know it's bullshit because you own the property. I know it was bullshit. So that's what I do. I go bonkers. I might break a lamp. It's my lamp, right? In the Elmont house, it was fully staged. These guys were using my beds and all my furniture. So I broke something. Like, I just made it clear it's not worth their trouble and they should get out of there. They got out. I always put up I'll put up fake cameras. I just took some down. Let me get some. Home Depot sells these fake cameras which look real. I'll put this on an interior camera, and it's got like a flashing light. They're like $30. But this one goes on the exterior. Also, they look like real cameras. And then I'll put up signs basically saying, "Don't come back. You're under video surveillance." That's what I do. I just had a squatter situation in Valley Stream where it was just some crazy lady. The cops took her away. So if you're afraid of going the crazy route, you can always call me. I'm happy to bring a bat and a crowbar to the place and find somebody big, find somebody angry. You got to scare them out of there. If they're out of the house, they have no more rights. Cops will never tell them to go back in. If they're in the house and the cop comes, the cop's not in the mood to deal with you, he's just going to say, "Listen, it's not my problem. You got to go to court." So I say always go bananas with squatters. That's my theory. Let's talk about the basic eviction process in Nassau County, how it works. The first thing is you have to give notice to the occupant to leave. So as we said, that really depends on the situation, right? If it's a standard tenant who is not under lease, it's 30-day notice, and you have to give it by the end of the calendar month. So I recently had a case where we screwed up. We closed on the 31st of the month, and I gave notice that day, and the guy said he was going to challenge service because we closed at 2 p.m. Close like 2 days before the end of the month, and then give notice the next day, and then you're fine. If you're a new owner, you may have to send a copy of the deed, to show them that you own the property. Right? I had a guy who actually appealed the eviction situation. He said that the deed wasn't exhibited. Whatever, it took an extra year. Very rare that anybody's going to appeal this. It's very expensive. Now, after this notice period ends, so whether you have to give a month's notice or 6 months notice if you buy an occupied property from foreclosure, then you go and get a court date. You go to court and you give them a date. Now, you don't really have to professionally serve them the initial notice. They're rarely going to challenge that service, but you have to serve them professionally with a process server this notice of the court date. Always use a process server. I have a place I use called Alert Processing. It's like $75 because that is the number one reason why cases get tossed out. I see it all the time. They didn't serve them properly. They have to be served between 5 and 12 days before the court date. If they get served too far in advance or too close, then it's thrown out. If it's not professionally done and there's an affidavit of service, it gets thrown out. I would say 20% of the cases that are there, the landlord cheaped out, didn't spend $75, had his friend serve them or his landlord serve them, and the case is tossed. It's the easiest way to not to get pushed back in a few more months. What happens at the court date is your attorney is going to show up, and there could be adjournments, which is a postponement. Now, in Nassau County, a postponement is usually like 2 weeks. In New York City, a postponement can be 3-4 months. So that's why it takes forever in New York. And everybody's entitled to one adjournment. But like if a person knows the system and you get up there and you say, "I don't speak English," they're going to adjourn it and get you a translator. If a person goes up there and says, "I don't know what's going on," then they're going to adjourn it and get a free attorney for them. So there are easy ways to get adjourned. But the court's not going to give them a lot of adjournments, maybe 1 and maybe 2. The court always asks the landlord and tenant to try to mediate the dispute first. They tell you to go to another room where a mediator sits there. It could be an ex-judge or somebody who just does mediation. And they're basically going to say, "What do you want? What do you want? Can we come to some agreement?" And if you come to an agreement, then they draw up a stipulation. Most cases, 90%, get mediated and get a stipulation, right? The court doesn't want to go to trial, and this avoids trial. So I see stupid landlords all the time who say, "No way, I'm not doing any of this. I want a judgment." And it's just stupid. The way to do that with mediation, what I say is give me some money today by the end of the day, and give me some money within 2 weeks, that kind of thing. Now, for a lot of tenants, they think this is just kicking the can down the road. What they don't realize is when you sign a stipulation in court, if you violate that stipulation, and that means, I'm talking literally, the guy said he was going to pay you today and he didn't pay you today, All you have to do at that point is sign an affidavit of non-compliance, send it in, and you automatically, the guy's out of there. Like, not out of there, but you automatically get a judgment for foreclosure and a warrant for possession. So it's a great thing to do if you can go to mediate. Now, if you can't mediate, you have to come back for trial. That's going to take some time. If the tenant loses at trial or violates the stipulation, you're going to get a judgment for possession. So that means basically foreclosure. You need to get a transcript of judgment in a few steps, then you go to the sheriff. Now, this whole process until now, besides your legal fee, has been very cheap. Court fees are a few $100. But where it gets complicated is that if a sheriff's going to go evict somebody, in Nassau County, you need to hire a moving company. Now, you don't have to pay them anything now, but the sheriff's going to give you a date and say, oh, we're evicting in 2 weeks. And he's going to give them a 72-hour notice, which means you have 3 days to get out. Most people leave when they get that notice, but some don't. The only real expensive part of the eviction is if the tenant stays and they're still there at the eviction, because then you got to pay this moving company, usually thousands of dollars, money to move their stuff out and to store it for 30 days. That's where it gets expensive, and it depends on how much stuff there is. If there's not a lot of stuff, it could be $1,000. I have a very good mover too. For some reason, the sheriff always recommends this network movers. They rip you off blind. I have much better movers if anybody wants. Much cheaper, half the price. So that's my thing on occupied property. So let's talk about the ways I can help you if you're interested in wholesaling or flipping houses in New York. So a few ways I can help you. I can get you a list of prospects that you can call at a very reduced price. You can pay my rate. I can get you probate leads at reduced prices. I can get you discounted subscription to PropStream. PropStream is a really good service to comp out properties if you're not licensed and don't have access to the multiple listing service. And I think I'm the only person who gets a discount on that. I can skip trace lists and get phone numbers at very low prices. I get the best data, tier 1 level data. And I also have virtual assistants with available hours to call if you want. You can get the great CRM that I use at a discount if you need that. If you're just starting, you don't need it. And I have a course that also teaches everything that I know. So it's a home-based virtual course. There are 9 modules. It's about an hour and a half to, each module is about an hour and a half to 2 hour webinar. There's lots of additional content. The standard price of the course is $847. I'm raising the price soon. About 60 people have signed up already. If you sign up in July, you can use the code REIA10 off. You get 10% off the price. There's coupon codes. That should be July. That should be August, sorry. Coupon code ends at the end of August, and the course price is definitely going up soon. There's the 9 modules of the course to explain what you're learning. First one is on mindset. That's real estate mindset and success mindset. What's different about real estate in New York? The choices you need to make before you start, what to think about, mostly where you're going to operate and what you're going to do. 4th module is marketing and getting leads. The 5th is sales conversion, making offers, how to come up with offers and how to get the seller to say yes. The 6th one is funding your deal, how to raise money for it. The 7th one is rehabbing and wholetailing, like what work you should do on a property. The 8th is finding buyers. The 9th is closing, what happens at closing, what you should bring to closing. And there's a bonus module. If you're interested in the course, I'll put it in the chat if you want to take a look. Our next virtual meeting will be August 20th, so 2 weeks from today from 4 to 5:30 p.m. When did I try to put a link for my course? If you're interested, is how to flip to your course. I think that works. Okay. Some free resources if you want. So you have my YouTube channel, which is called Wholesaling and Flipping in New York. I give away a lot of content. I post 3 to 5 times a week. You can look at my Facebook page, which is still LMPK Properties, which is my old company. You can get updates on what I'm working on. I'm a member of this national mastermind called Investor Field. 2 of the members are really good. One's John Martinez. He has a company called MidwestRev.com. I think he's the #1 trainer for real estate investors, sales trainer, like how to talk to sellers. And he gives away a lot of stuff for free. And there's the Flip Nerd podcast with Mike Hambright. He's got like 1,600 episodes. He's been doing it for like 5 years. There are people who built their whole business based on that. It doesn't really work in New York, but it gives you a basic idea of how things work. If you haven't signed up for this meetup group, please join at meetup.com/Nassau-County-REIA to get updates. And now we're talking about questions and answers. If anybody wants to talk, you can either type it in the chat or you can unmute yourself and talk. And I am happy to answer any question you might have. Don't all talk at once. Sorry, if you're typing, I'll wait. So I'm gonna definitely stay on till 5 o'clock, even if I have to just talk. But I'd prefer to answer questions, and I'll go till 5:30. Does anybody have any questions whatsoever? Anything? Nothing. Anybody have a topic they want me to talk about? If you don't have any questions, I'll talk about anything. Nothing. Wow. I'll give it a couple of minutes. I figure you guys might be typing. Anybody have any questions? Wow. All right. I'll give you some time. See if anybody's still on in 5 minutes. I think everybody's leaving. Jomo asks, what do you anticipate the wholesale market will look like in 6 months? I don't know. Right now it's smoking hot. I don't know. It could be on the way down. It's not a reason not to buy. I mean, a lot of people feel like, oh, if the market's going down, I shouldn't buy the properties. I don't agree with that anymore. I think I got to buy properties. And if I get stuck with a couple where I'm not making what I thought I was going to make, I'm still okay with that. Right? Even if I have to lose a drop. But I'm going to continue to buy. And when COVID started, I started dropping my offer prices by 10%. But that has not proven to be good. Like I probably should have bought some more properties that I bid too low on. So I don't know what the wholesale market's going to be like. But right now, in the beginning of COVID, it was hard because a lot of the hard money lenders pulled back. Some of them weren't lending. Some of them closed. But most of them are back. So before COVID, most hard money lenders were lending 90% of the purchase price plus 100% of the construction. At this point, a lot of them are back to 80 to 85%. So they're close. If the market stays strong, I think they'll go back to 90%. But I'm telling you, despite the fact that I believe the market's going to crash, the only real change in my business is that I'm trying to stay out of long-term rehabs. I don't want to get into, like, some lady offered me some land to build that I really could not sell to a builder. And I don't want to get into a 9-month or a 12-month project. But I'm happy to get into a wholesale deal that I can get in and out of quickly, or a hotel deal. I just bought a property last Friday, so almost a week ago, for $450, and I found a buyer for it on Sunday for $575. I'm not going to profit $125,000 because it's probably going to cost me $50,000 in closing costs and holding costs. But that's a pretty good deal. I'm probably going to make 75 grand. Then I owned it for 2 days before. I mean, they're signing the contracts today. I mean, that's great. So I believe if you're in something short, you should stay in it. Hi, Mike. Deborah asks, with the courses that include mentorship. So I definitely help people who are in the course, right? I don't want to say, hey, I'm going to spend all this time, but yeah, it probably does. So if you want to buy the course, you're going to get a lot of feedback from me, and you're going to be able to call me. So I would say I can help you, sure. I've had a lot of people approach me about so is it not good to do any rehabs now? If it's a quick rehab, if it's something you really can get in and out of quick in a month or two, I don't see the market. I just don't see how the government is going to allow the entire economy to tank so badly before the election. So I figure you got a good 6 months. But if you get into something that's like a 9-month, or something that's going to take, there's a problem. In general, things take forever to get permits here, like Town of North Hempstead. Town of North Hempstead is a disaster. But now they're all taking this, oh, we can't come into work because of COVID BS tact. So it's even taking longer to get permits. So if you need to get permits on something, I would say be careful. If you can do something without a permit, you might want to do that if it's small. I'm buying something that I think I can get in and out of in 6 weeks. If it takes longer, then it could be a risk. So I don't know. Like I said, I think the market's going to go down. I'm not going to not buy properties because I think the market's going down. I have no idea when it's going to go down. And I think when it does go down, there'll be a lot more properties. So got to make hay when the sun shines. Got to make money now. So I'm buying wholesale properties up the gazoo. I'm even buying some short sales that I know I can turn quickly. A lot of people look at this and they say they want to make a guess about where the market's going to go. And I did on this conference, and I've been doing it for a few months, making a guess about where the market's going to go. But I'm not adjusting my business because of that in any way, except staying away from long-term rehab deals, which, to be honest, I was pushing away from beforehand. Right? I'd much rather go shorter on everything. Right? I've been doing this for years. But you got to understand the real estate market is cyclical. It goes up and down. It's usually in 8 to 10 year cycles, right? Sometimes it's longer, right? The last cycle before 2008 lasted longer, but that was artificially inflated by these crazy mortgages that everybody was getting. But the bottom in New York was really 2008. So we're 12 years into an upcycle. It's been up for 12 years straight. It's going to go down, but I've never seen a bigger reason why just staring us in the face. Like, there are millions of people in our area that were going to buy houses that are not going to buy houses now. So to me, it's just like amazing. Like, you almost never get an opportunity to know what's coming. And it's going to be great for my business and great for anybody who's marketing to motivated sellers, because there's going to be a lot more motivated sellers. Because as soon as the market really, as soon as the media acknowledges that the market has turned, and people start believing that the longer they own a property, the less it's going to be worth, there's going to be a lot more properties that I and anybody who does what I do can buy. I feel very strongly about that. But I tell people this, and they're like, well, why would I buy a wholesale property if it's going to be worth less? If you have enough of a spread, you can make it happen, right? In general, when I buy a property, I try to have at least 2 options to disposition it. So I believe I can wholesale, and sometimes I can't. But if I buy it cheap enough, I know that I can do work to it, rehab it. Sometimes I can wholesale it. Sometimes I can rehab it. So you got to buy properties cheap enough. So if the market really starts to turn, then obviously we're going to have to adjust the prices that I pay to buy a property. That's fine. But the idea that you're going to be able to pinpoint that or sit it out and wait until it happens just doesn't make sense. You have to be marketing now to get in front of those people who in a year from now are afraid their property is going to be worth a lot less. So that is what I'm doing. I just bought a chunk of data, and I'm starting to mail as soon as I can. Hopefully by the next meeting, I'll start mail going out. It might be right after that, but I'm starting to mail. I take a list and I market to it 4 ways. I mail it, I RVM it, which means I drop Ringler's voicemails. I skip trace it, and then I RVM it, Ringler's voicemail. I have cold callers call it, and I also text it. So I believe in 4 ways of attacking every list. That's the way I feel. Any other questions? No questions. I'll give it a couple minutes. Any questions? You can ask questions about anything. Anything. Does not have to be about anything we discussed. Anyone? Anyone? Again, you don't have to come on. You can type. Ahmad asks, how much capital does someone have if they're trying to start a wholesale business? So I think you only need about $1,500 to start if you can give it the time after that to call and text. When I say $1,500, I mean you got to buy a list, right? And I can get you a list cheap from Listability if you want. And you got to skip trace the list, and I can skip trace if you're a little cheaper. So it's about somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 if you're going to work with a list of 10,000. I think you should work with a list of about 10,000. Once you have that list, at that point, you can literally call from your phone or text from your phone. You're going to need to do that religiously every day. You don't need anything else, just a Google sheet to track people that said maybe or yes to you. That's free. Calling and texting, I would use Google Voice Number, which is free, but you can do that through your phone. You can text and call through Google Voice on your phone. So I'd say about $1,500 to start a wholesale business. Now, once you get a seller that says yes, you need to be very careful, because standard deposits, EMD, earnest money deposit in New York, is 10%. So if you find a deal and you're buying it for 250,000 that you think you can wholesale for 300,000, for example, if you don't play your cards right, you're gonna have to come up with $25,000 to give the seller. Now, people have come to me and I put up my own money to do it. That's not a problem if you need help, but there are ways to get the seller to give you a reduced deposit. You're not going to do it for $50 or $100 like you see on the internet in other states, but you might be able to get them down to 5,000. Might be able to get them down to 10,000. But that's your need. But again, if you're the hard part of the business is just finding discounted deals. Everything else is easy. The money is easy. If it's a good deal, you get the money from me. You get the money from any investor. So don't worry about that part. It's just getting the hard part is getting on the phone with people, many of which are going to tell you to drop dead, go to hell. Somebody told me to die in a fire recently. And you got to go through all that rejection to kiss a lot of frogs to get to that one prince who's going to say to you, yeah, you know what? I can't stand this house, or I just inherited this house. I just got a tax bill. The tenant just told me that he's not paying rent. And the tenant's leaving, but I can't deal with it. I got to get out of here in a month. You got to talk to enough people that you're going to find the standard reasons why people sell off market to an investor to get to those people and get those deals. That is the whole business, is finding those deals. I speak to people all the time who are telling me, I'm going to start my wholesale business as soon as I build my buyer's list. It's a tremendous waste of time. Complete waste of time. You feel like you're productive, but you're wasting your time. Or people say, oh, I just have to get my financing in order, my funding in order. Also a waste of time. Get the deal, and all those things will come to you. Buyers will come to you. Money will come to you. Very simple. Thank you, because I've heard so many people in states like Pennsylvania tell me I don't need much money to get a deal under contract. Yeah, so the three most common misconceptions that I hear from people all the time, and they're getting these things from very good people on the internet who are good guys, right? There are a lot of great guys on the internet. Brent Daniels is awesome. Max Maxwell's great. There's a million. Tom Kroll, Cody Hoffman, these guys are great. But they're going to tell you how wholesaling works in 49 states, because New York is different. So the three things I hear all the time, I mean, every week I hear the same three things. I hear, what contract do you use? Now, people don't understand, in New York, you don't prepare the contract. The seller's attorney prepares the contract. When a seller says yes to you, he then has to have his attorney prepare a contract. So there's no contract. I hear, the second thing I hear is, do you know an investor-friendly title company? Yeah, that doesn't apply in New York either, right? The transaction doesn't get run by a title company in New York. It's run by an attorney, your attorney. So you need an investor-friendly attorney. The title companies are all the same in New York. And the third thing I hear is, how long of an inspection contingency do you have on your contracts? So there's no inspection contingency in New York. In New York, inspections get done before the contract. So every time I go into contract, and pretty much every time you're going to go into contract if you're doing this, you're going in hard. You have no way out. The only out is if there's a title issue, which means every time you go into contract, you need to either sign that contract or close on the property, right? And that is the way it works. And that's how it's worked on every deal I've ever done, except for a couple that had title issues and they died over that. So when I hear any of those three things, right? Investor-friendly title company, what contract do you use, inspection contingency, I know that the person has learned that question from people who do this outside of New York. It is very, very different in New York. And even as I say these words, it sounds crazy to me. I think I'm the only person teaching how to do it in New York. Now, there are a lot of advantages to New York, despite the fact that you have to go in hard, despite the fact that that you can't get out of the contract, despite the fact that the way it works is complicated. There's a lot of amazing things about New York. I choose to stay in New York. I can do this anywhere else. The two best things in New York, maybe three best things in New York, are that you make a lot more money in New York, right? I average about $30,000 for wholesale deals. There are very few places in the country that average that much. You want to talk about people in Pennsylvania, they're probably happy with an $8,000 to $10,000 wholesale fee. Second thing that's great is there's very little competition in New York, and people are shocked when I tell them that. But because of all the reasons why it's different in New York, most people don't do it in New York, right? Tom Kroll is a great example, right? He runs Wholesaling Inc. The guy was born in Long Beach, New York, right here. But he lives in Port St. Lucie, and I don't think the guy's ever done a deal in New York. And 99% of the gurus that are out there, if not 100%, never would do a deal in New York because it's just so different than everything else. And the third thing that's great is you can't get out of contract. Well, it's very hard to get into contract. It's almost impossible to get out of contract. So when you hear these guys say, hey, you just write a check for $50 and push it across the kitchen table when the seller says yes, what happens is the next day that seller calls you up and goes, I changed my mind, and he's out. But in New York, once you're in contract, you're not getting out because you can sue a guy for specific performance, which means the entire loan amount, the entire purchase price. So if a guy goes in the contract for $300,000, changes his mind, you could sue him for $300,000, and his attorney's going to know that. So those are the reasons why New York is great. The main thing, again, you make more money and less competition. Much, 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 much better, and very underestimated factors. Not competing is a big deal. You go into a place like Phoenix or Dallas, somebody shows up on a list, any list, probate list, code violation list. He's going to get 80 postcards in the mail within a week from investors. He's going to have people lined up to buy that house. That doesn't happen in New York. Most of the time in New York, I'm the only guy making an offer. I'm not saying I haven't lost deals to other investors. It happens, but there's much less competition in New York, much less. Any other questions? I'm staying on till 5, so we're on 7 minutes. Okay, 2 more questions. Jomo, what are the other lawyer states besides New York? So there are a lot of states that are technically lawyer states. I know one of the Carolinas is a lawyer state, but it's not the same like as it is in New York. Like I know in North Carolina, I know like one of the Carolinas is a lawyer state. All that means is that the lawyer affiliates himself with a title company. The title company does the transaction. Lawyer in North Carolina, I think, gets paid $200 on the transaction. In New York, it's like $2,000-$3,000. It's crazy. It's the only state where it works this way. The only state. Deborah Rush Murphy, how many people should you call in a day? It's hard to say that. Because I would say you just pick a certain amount of time. Call for 2 hours a day, for example, because you never know how many people you're going to connect with, right? But if you call a certain amount of hours every day, eventually you'll get in touch with people, and then you may have to question whether you want to use a predictive dialing system like Mojo or Zen Call or Call Tools. So you're making more connections. That's a question you got to answer. You got to sort of see it over time. Ahmad, Georgia is an attorney state as well. I know, but Georgia does not work the same way in New York. In Georgia, without a doubt, you can go to in 49 states, you can go to the seller and go into contract with him as well. All it means with an attorney state is that an attorney has to be affiliated with the title company that does the transaction. The attorney's not drawing up the contract in any state besides New York. I know this because when I tell people from other states that an attorney draws this contract, they look at me like I'm from outer space. They don't even understand the concept, right? It's completely foreign to everybody else in the country. Of course, as you know, when the auctions are opening in New York, I don't know when. Again, it's the government, so things are being handled poorly. The real estate office is open right now. What kind of real estate offices? I see you typing. Brokers or agents? Yeah, they're open. I mean, yeah. You saw that slide. I mean, showings are double now what they were before. Yeah, I mean, some brokers and agents are being ridiculous about it. Like they started having people sign a COVID-19 release form. I can't think of a stupider form I've ever seen in my life. The idea, and here's what the release form says. I'm going to show you a property. If you drop dead of COVID, you can't sue me. I don't know one person in the world that really knows where they got their COVID from. You really could prove I got it? You know, I was perfectly healthy. I went to see this house. I dropped dead a week later. You don't know if you got it at the house. It's just so stupid. I mean, the whole way people are handling this is ridiculous. I couldn't get in to see a house because I hadn't signed the COVID release form like a week ago. So I signed it. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But yeah, definitely brokers and agents are open. Some people working from home. I mean, sometimes you call the front desk and you tell somebody, and you hear a dog barking when they answer, or a baby crying. But basically, the real estate business is not just back, but it's super, super hot. New York is really selling quickly. Ahmad, New York is just difficult. That's why there's not too much competition. Exactly. You're 100% right. And that's all I knew, right? So for me, it works fine. I think if you learn from somebody who's teaching how to do this in New York, and you get into the business understanding how it works in New York, it's not going to seem difficult. It's just going to seem like the way it is. But less competition and you make more money. So I think for me, it's worth it. I'm happy. I'm happy in New York. I'm sticking around here. Anything else? We got 3 more minutes, but I'll stay as long as you guys need to answer questions. Anything? Anyone? Nothing? All right, we got 2 minutes. Type it in or unmute yourself. I'm going to wait. If not, then I'm going to punch out at 5. Again, you can ask any question you want. It doesn't have to be about anything we spoke about. If you missed it and you're afraid that I spoke about it already, I'll answer it again. I don't care. Deborah asks, are you finding it more difficult to get houses under contract? No, I'm not. It's been pretty much the same. I mean, there's always effort involved in that, right? You got to market to them, you got to convert them, you got to speak to them a certain way, but it's not more difficult. The only issue that's coming up is some people actually are seeing the prices and are saying, wow, market's really hot. But that always happens. People's perception is not something you can worry about. It's pretty much the same now as it has been. Right? Which is why I'm a big believer that when the market turns and the media starts talking about how the market's crashing and talk about pre-2008, I think it's going to be much better for us. Ahmad asks, so when you say the inspection is done before you go into contract, would you have to bring your inspector contractor with you when looking at a potential deal? So I don't bring anybody to me, and I don't do inspections. But when I sell a property, once you agree on a price and you accept an offer, that's when they call the inspector to show up. And basically, every attorney that's involved in a real estate transaction is going to say that do the inspection before the contract. And if there's any repairs you want made, we're going to put it as an addendum to the contract. Now, in other states, because you're going to contract at a kitchen table, seller to buyer, the buyer very often asks for an inspection period of time. During that time, he can cancel the contract. But because the almighty attorneys are involved, their attitude is, I'm not drawing up a contract if someone could just walk from it. If I'm drawing up a contract, I want that guy to have to close. Now, the standard contingency that's in almost every contract is a mortgage contingency. They understand that if the guy can't get a mortgage, the deal is closed. But any other contingency is something that they're not going to want to put into the contract. So that is how it works. So I can estimate repairs myself. Now, if you're someone who's new, you can't estimate repairs. You might want to bring a contractor, but I don't do inspections when I buy a property. Deborah Rushmore, will you cover how to determine prices for repairs in future meetings? I can go through that if you want. Let me write it down. Next, I want to do the next one is estimating repairs. It's a longer topic, but I can condense it. Deborah, I'll do it next time. Jomo, do you invest outside of town of Hempstead? How are the other towns different? Yes, I definitely outside town of Hempstead. I buy in all of Nassau County. Town of North Hempstead is the worst, is the absolute worst municipality that I deal with. I waited 13 months for a contract for a permit there. If you want to look, you'll see. And town of North Hempstead. There's only 3 towns in the whole Nassau County: it's Hempstead, North Hempstead, and Oyster Bay. The town of North Hempstead had a problem a few years ago. I'd say 4 years ago, and I think people were taking bribes, and they arrested a bunch of people. So they shifted completely the other way, and now they take forever. You can find comps when you look in the town of North Hempstead where you'll see something that went to contract and then closed for 3 years. And that's common. And you're like, what the hell is that? That's weird. What it was is that there was some open permit, and the buyer was able to wait, and it took 3 years to clear. I had a situation where 13 months or 14 months to get a permit. They're terrible. But you got to deal with, there's a million villages you got to deal with, and then there's town. I definitely buy outside toward town North Hempstead. Some villages are easy, some villages are hard. Village of Malvern is not so easy. Village of Freeport can be difficult, but some villages are great. Rockville Center is pretty easy. So yeah, it's fine. All right. All right, it's 5:02. I'll give it another minute. If anybody has a question, that's fine. Otherwise, I'm going to end the meeting. Again, you can ask anything now if you want. Speak now or wait 2 weeks. Or you can call me if you want. Put my phone number there if you want to call me. Jomo, you are welcome. Anybody can call me in the office. Deborah, in 2 weeks, I'm going to do estimating repairs. You better be on that call or I'm going to be very disappointed. It's a hard thing to teach. I can warn you now. It's not a simple thing. It's different in every situation, but I'll try and keep it succinct. All right, everyone, thanks for coming. And everyone's come in a month. In 2 weeks, our next meeting is August 20. What the hell is it? August 20th. Bye-bye, everybody.